take our lips and speak with them, take our minds and think through them, take our hands and work with them, take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you and all of creation. Amen. Did you catch who I was impersonating? It might be hard. Megan Rapinoe. Any World Cup soccer fans out there? Trivia again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the Netherlands. They played a great game. The U.S. women won. Megan Rapinoe scored the Golden Foot, the Golden Boot Award, I think 6 goals through the tournament. And after she scores her goals, if you hadn't noticed, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, she'll stand there after scoring a goal, stops, puts her arms out, and there's that stance, there's that look. It's a power pose. It's so much. There's a smile in there. There's incredible confidence in there. There's incredible joy in there. There's the voice of, I have worked hard to get here in there. It is indeed a power pose, as many physical therapists remind us that if you wake up every morning and do that, you're going to be stronger. You're going to be able to take on the day with more capacity, more creativity, and even more joy. It's been so great seeing that stance these years and these days. Of course, that stance is not the only stance that Megan Rapinoe has taken. For the past 3 years, in solidarity with Kaepernick, she has kneeled when the national anthem has been sung until the U.S. Soccer Federation required that she stand. But as you notice, and much press coverage has leaned in, perhaps a lot of scrutiny because she's a woman, she has been standing in silence, in solidarity with all that Kaepernick has stood for. Until black and brown bodies matter with equality, she will continue that slight and silent protest, as many others have, increasingly over the years. That stance that we have seen has been a stance not just for USA, but equal pay. That has transformed the landscape in a wonderful way. Sadly, if the U.S. had not won, I don't think we would have heard the amplification of that, and that movement toward equal pay. Of course, we're talking not just for professional sports players who only earn a quarter of their male colleagues what they earn in similar competitions. But we're talking about equal pay writ large. The gender gap in the United States is still only 80% to the dollar. 80 cents to the dollar is what a woman will make. Mostly that is someone who is categorized in our nation as someone of privilege. If you move down the line, people of color, transgender people, and others, the pay rate decreases. Equality is far from being achieved, and it's been inspiring, I think, to see this figure, this strong female character, this strong LGBTQ advocate, representing so much more, being seen through the eyes of young girls and young boys and young kids who not yet have figured out where they fall on the beautiful spectrum that God has ordained. Friends, this is the stance that we lean into today. A stance of power, a stance of joy, a stance of arms wide open. And sadly, it's a stance that we need all too well to realize today. For far too many are cowering not in this stance, but behind bars and behind cages. This past Friday, our city joined in with the nationwide Liberty for All, Liberty Lights, the Lights for Liberty Vigil around our country, where thousands upon thousands gathered. Why? Because we needed to hold signs that said, kids need to be cage-free. No kids in cages? I couldn't believe my eyes that we here in downtown Boston in 2019 had signs and a rally of people saying kids need to be cage-free. Close the camps. The word concentration camps being used again in a very real way. The photos of 7 of the children who have died in U.S. protection being lifted forward. Felipe Gomez, Alonzo, Carlos Hernandez, Jacqueline McKean, and 4 more others. Signs, I was hungry, thirsty, and you welcomed me. Love your neighbors. I was serious when I said that. These were the signs hoisted in the midst of our common. And I'm grateful that those who gathered on Friday, many covenant members among the crowd, were standing for the groups like Mira and Indivisible and New Sanctuary Coalition and so many others who are keeping vigil, not only with candles, but with fierceness and advocacy, speaking up on behalf of those who are behind bars. This is a new era, I trust, and I pray. And I pray that that resounding voice would change policy and would change minds and hearts. Mira, New Sanctuary Coalition, the advocates have eyes to see. Megan Rapinoe has had eyes to see as she's amplified the voice of justice with the privilege that she has had on that global stage. So too the Samaritan in today's story has eyes to see, if we would listen to what he sees. We encountered this morning, thanks to Karen's wonderful reading, a story within a story. The first one, a lawyer and a rabbi walk into a bar. The lawyer tests the rabbi. Rabbi, tell me about salvation. What's it all about? Tell me, what is the secret to life? The teacher pauses, like a cross-legged yogi perched on a peak, and deflects back. You tell me. The lawyer uses the language that he knows, the language of the law, and replies, love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. The rabbi smiles and says, yes, you have it. And yet the inquisitive lawyer, as if to justify himself, continues on. Who is my neighbor? And this question is the one that hinges upon both stories. The new second story emerges from this question, meaning we're to focus in on it. Who is my neighbor? And of course, that well-known parable emerges. A man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho fell into the hands of robbers. We know it well. Perhaps like some of the most told parables of Jesus, we might know it too well. So it's good to listen in a new way. We remember that road at the time of Jesus that really does descend many thousand feet from Jerusalem to Jericho was known as the way of blood because of the robbers who frequented that area. So you took your life into your hands when you traveled that road. So Jesus places this story in a place that was known for fear. And we know how it goes from there, left half dead, a minister, clergy member. Rob Bark walks by, crosses to the other side. He's too busy. He's got some meetings to attend to. He needs to get to a rally on the common. And next, a scribe, a Levite, someone in power, someone with religious authority, also passes by. Has too much to attend to, wants to remain ritually clean. And then the Samaritan comes, also sees, just like the first two, text says in each case, he sees. But the Samaritan, of course, stops, not only sees, but has mercy, filled with compassion is the verb here. Changes course, stops, takes care of this beaten man, puts him on his own animal, brings him into town, finds the inn, perhaps the innkeeper that maybe he was the same one where there was no room at the inn earlier in the text, finds that innkeeper and gives him a blank check saying, take care, whatever else is owed, I will come back for and make good on it. This Samaritan is the radical example of compassion. It goes the extra mile times 10. And yet often, because of the headings in our scripture, which were put in several hundred years after the first texts were written, we must remember, we link this to the Good Samaritan. It's more effective to think about this story as the Bad Samaritan. Remember, the hearers of Jesus' story here would have been shocked to hear the word Samaritan used in this context. Did you mean to say faithful Jew? Are you talking about a faithful Samaritan? That's an oxymoron. You can't have faith and be a Samaritan. They're the ones that we're called to wipe out. Yeah, they may be closely associated with us. We may have common roots and a common ancestor, but the Samaritan way is not the Jewish way. It's not the way of Jesus. It's not the way of this new experiment, even, that we are trying to work out. And yet Jesus uses this example to provoke, of course. think of a group that you understand as enemy or as opposed to the gospel of love, the gospel of justice. It could be Democrats, it could be Republicans, it could be Warren supporters, it could be Trump supporters, it could be undocumented immigrants, it could be wealthy white elite. Whatever that category of other feels like to you, insert that before the word Samaritan, and you'll get a bit of feel for what Jesus is trying to provoke in this story. Compassion, the parable of the good enemy, the parable of who is my neighbor. And so, at the end of the story, of course, we go back to the original story after the parable ends and Jesus turns to that lawyer and asks, who is the one who shows the most neighborly love? Who is the one that is the neighbor? And of course, the lawyer says, without naming the Samaritan, notice, it says the one who shows mercy, the one who shows compassion. Indeed, you are right, go and do likewise. Jesus commands. Compassion, hospitality. Who is my neighbor? I truly hope it's not the person I live next to. In Newton, yesterday, I got my lawnmower sharpened. It had long been dull, and I had it sharpened by our True Value hardware store. It's one of those powerless ones, and I was pushing it, and I realized that it was so sharp, and it created a huge, high, piercing sound into the neighborhood. And I'm glad that I'm not called to love the person that lives next to me, Louis, because clearly he was disturbed. I think I'm missing the point. We are to call ourselves into neighborly love in our own neighborhood. At that same time, I went to throw away some of the clippings and opened up the trash can that we put our trash in. I looked in and there was a raccoon in my trash can. We'd been there for at least 24 hours. I had to quickly let him go. The raccoon my neighbor too? Indeed. But Jesus here calls us to even harder neighborly love. Of course, we know this. Peter Gomes is famous to say, hospitality is a hassle, because it fundamentally is about relationship, about entering into a form of intimacy with strangers and the unknown. And biblical hospitality has to do with the kindness of strangers, and that's just part of the problem. It's also part of the solution. We know that there is power in hospitality. We learned that over the past few weeks in our scriptures. When we welcome the stranger, often we have the power. And this story begins to turn that on its head, to call that out. The guest is in the hands of the host, but that's not necessarily the way it should be. The compassion that comes from the Samaritan here, again, goes way beyond justice. We often cry for justice. We need more justice in our society, in our world. We know that. But the story here goes way beyond justice into the realm of compassion and mercy. More than it would have been sufficient for the Samaritan to stop and bind the wounds and send the person on his way to make sure he was safe. But he goes the extra mile. This, friends, is the invitation to think about loving our neighbor as ourselves. So we know that the Samaritan does the right thing, but that is a hard thing. It is very hard to realize that. We know that when we walk by someone who may be asking for money on the streets. We know that when we get angry at someone who voices a different opinion than we have politically or socially. We know it's hard to cross the literal and figurative aisles in our world. But notice there's no guidebook here. The Samaritan has no other source to do this hard thing. There's no one looking on. There's no one that he can impress himself toward or be impressed with. I have to admit that when I'm walking to lunch with one of you, perhaps here, and I see someone who asks for money, I'm much more likely to talk and think with them if one of you is by my side than when I'm alone and I'm late for that rally. That accountability is an important piece, but this Samaritan has none of that. He's by himself. He has no other guidebook than what is within. So we ask the question, how can he do this hard work? We take the lead from Richard Rohr, a great spiritualist and mystic in New Mexico right now, Center for Contemplation and Action. When asked to summarize the whole Christian experiment, the whole way of being for our faith, in 2 words, he says, incarnational mysticism. Incarnational because God becomes Jesus and therefore causes material to be good. matters, and how people live in the world matters. Mysticism, because Jesus calls us to move beyond mere belief and beyond just systems of belonging to the actual inner experience of God, experiencing God within. Experiencing God within allows us to see a neighbor beyond ourselves. So we imagine this Samaritan knew his scriptures. They were the same scriptures as the Jews who had walked by, the minister, the pastor who had walked by. It was the same scripture, but he'd somehow been formed in a community that made him take that scripture seriously and let it descend into his heart. As the Celtics say, perhaps this Samaritan was listening to the very heartbeat of God, like the beloved disciple who leans up against Jesus in the Last Supper, was listening intently to the heartbeat of God, the form of Jesus. The Samaritan woman at the well is the other image that we keep in mind in this context. She is the one who asks for living water, this spiritual and physical reality. Yes, she wants to drink water there at the well, but she wants something more. She embodies this desire to seek God in her inner being. If you got a chance to see the image that I sent around today, it is by Van Gogh, of course. Good Samaritan, this painting. This painting was mimicked after a Delacroix painting, and it's a mirror image actually of it. There are some important differences. First and foremost, this is one of the last paintings that Van Gogh painted. It was in 1890, the year where he died, the year where he took his own life, where he was painting this painting in that French asylum, locked behind bars, but he was painting nonetheless. And this painting is far more colorful than the one in which it was inspired from. And if you notice this painting, there is an incredible flow between the Samaritan and the unnamed one who has been left on life's roadside. And the Samaritan is lower than the one who has been elevated. You can see him struggling to put him up on that horse, leaning in. And the leggings of both are the same color intentionally, and the headbands are the same color, the bandage of the wounded one becoming the hat of the Samaritan. And you notice the signature Van Gogh piece here, the beard is red, on not the wounded one, but the Samaritan. And this is an important piece here. There is a oneness to the Samaritan in this image and the one who is wounded. And I think this is very intentional of Van Gogh. This is one of his lowest moments in life. He is locked up. His mind is getting beyond him. He is locked in depression, ignored by the world, not a penny to his name. And yet he doesn't put himself in a wounded position. He puts himself in the position of the one of compassion. And in that, he names that they are one and the same. In this understanding, Van Gogh teaches the world, and just a few years later, those images became worth gold in our world, as we saw the beauty behind what at the time people saw as nothing but disturbance. We see this and are inspired to love more, to seek more beauty. Just like the gathering on Friday here on the Boston Common, I love these gatherings in these disturbed days. We get to read inspiring quotes, but more importantly, we get to see the radical diversity that comes together and says, these are lies. There is a better way. There must be a better way forward, and there must be a way of love and non-judgment, and a much simpler way. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. There were lots of statues of liberty hats at this gathering. This is deeply in the American spirit, deeply in our tradition to welcome all. I was also deeply inspired yesterday among a handful of you that were gathered as we honored once again the memory and the legacy of our beloved sibling in faith, Elsa Abele, as a training center was dedicated to her honor in Watertown at the Association of Autism and Asperger Syndrome Network, the AANE, right there in Watertown. And we gathered here as it really was a time of memorial service and tribute to Elsa. We heard quote after quote from Kali about how incredible Elsa is and how much she has inspired them. We heard about her focus on compassion. Elsa was someone who showed up as her full self, and let people feel fully themselves, as they were, not as who they could become or who they should be, but as they were. We heard that over and over again. Someone who focused in on giving voice to the voiceless, on making people feel safe, on being a shining light, and treating people as if they were the most important person in the room at that time. Elsa never seemed to come with one eye out the door, one foot out the door, or something else on her mind. She showed up and was present with people, especially those on the spectrum, those who had challenges that she saw fully as God's beloved people. A colleague wrote about her, "The mention of Elsa's name always seems to conjure up a smile. She's like everyone's favorite grandmother, provided that grandma is an incomparable genius. She has a calming presence, reassuring style, and a sense of caring and compassion that is palpable and infectious." We heard yesterday the quote from John Keats, "Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter." Elsa listened to those unheard voices and those melodies and lifted them for all of us to hear. So did Van Gogh. So did the Samaritan on the roadside. Friends, may we listen together and ask the question, who is my neighbor? May we lean into that challenge of being incarnational mystics on the road, recognizing that God is connected to Jesus and therefore Jesus is connected within us. And so too, we are connected with one another. Emmanuel, inside, we embody God. And may we, as our hymn next sings out before us, understand that God still goes the road with us. When at last all those who suffer find their comfort, when they hope, though even hope seems hopelessness, when they love, though hate at times seems all around us, then we will know that God still goes the road with us. May we embody God. May those arms that are stretched out soon become the arms of embrace and welcome as we go and do likewise. Amen. God still goes the road with us. It's in our black hymnal. It is it's in our blue hymnal, 407. Our blue hymnal 407.